What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down why tomorrow is going to be another very important day as we have big data coming out tomorrow and how it may end up looking. I'm going to break down some news about earnings that just came out and what you should be watching for us to give you guys some predictions for tomorrow. But before I begin the devil's information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Weeble link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Weeble and deposit $500 into the account, you are guaranteed 20 free stocks. If you deposit $25,000 or more, you're guaranteed 75 free stocks, and the offer ends very, very soon. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening to the markets. Looking at SPY, as you can see, it's been going back and back and forth for about 2.5 days. Since this was like Monday, we saw this thing actually drop a little bit, and it's been going back and forth since then. Back and forth and back and forth. Now, the question is, which way is it going to go from here? Are we about to see a big squeeze to the upside? Are we about to bounce nicely? Are we about to see a lot of sellers step in? What's going to likely happen, in my opinion? I'm going to give you guys some predictions and also break down some data. But tomorrow is a very important day because do not forget at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have a lot of data coming out. That's an hour before the market opens. First and foremost, just know we have initial jobless claims coming out. We want this to be around 210,000. This is important because it's going to give us more insights on how the jobs sector is looking and what's happening with employment in the USA. Now, once all this data comes out, it might cause somewhat of a move. But on top of that, the biggest piece of data is not just the jobs numbers, but also PCE data. What is PCE? It's basically very similar to CPI. It's more looked at by the Fed, and we'll be watching to see what the numbers look like. So this is similar to CPI, basically another important inflationary measure. For core PCE, for January, we're expecting year over year a 2.8 to 2.9% report. 2.9% is what we got last time, so we're expecting core PCE to be very sticky and be very similar to what we got before. And then for all items PCE, we're expecting 2.4%. So we want this to be a little bit lower than what we got during the previous report. So we'll just have to wait and see what this looks like and how this ends up going. So that's what we're looking for when it comes to PCE. I also want to mention that later on during the day, we have Chicago PMI coming out at 9:45 a.m. The PMI is a very important measure to understand the many gauges of our economy. And then we also have a bunch of Fed speakers after that. We have Bostic from the Fed giving a speech at 10:50 a.m., not to mention Mester and a couple of others. So we'll be watching to see what happens with the Fed speakers. They're not as significant as the data in the morning. So the most important time to be watching the market would be the way we open, especially after all this data comes out, and get ready for a very, very big move. Now, I just want to mention that when it comes to PCE, we could compare this to CPI. CPI is something that can be very manipulated, just like PCE. So who knows what the data is going to look like? The last time CPI came out for the month of January, we got a decrease for all items for the overall number. This is year over year. But here's the thing, for essentially all items, it came up. It was basically the same as before. It slightly went up a little bit, but it's very, very minor. So this was a little bit hotter than what investors were wanting last time. So we'll see how things look. I think it's very likely that PCE is very close to expectations, where all items do drop a little bit. But for all items without food and energy or core, not too sure about that. That could be a little bit hot. So just be very careful with that. So we'll be watching the data for tomorrow. I'll be going over, excuse me, I'll be going over more details in just a couple of minutes. I want to mention something else, though. We had some big earnings that came out. We had Marathon, Snowflake, Salesforce, and AMC. Let's start off with AMC. How is AMC looking? Currently, the share price is down quite a bit. They did give us our full year 2023 results. They gave like a really nice transcript. And they broke down some important numbers. Let me just show you what this looks like. So right here, you have the full year summary. Total revenue was up about 23%. Not bad for 2023 relative to 2022. The net loss improved by 577 million to 396 million. So a slight decrease in how much they're actually losing money, which is not bad. And overall, the adjusted net loss was about 318 million. Not bad whatsoever. It's a slight improvement compared to before. I also want to note that for the fourth quarter, the total revenue was up 11%. Their EPS was actually a little bit better than what expectations were, with a diluted loss per share of about 54 cents. That's actually a lot better than the $1.40 compared to 2022. So these earnings are showing lots of improvement compared to the previous year. They're becoming closer and closer to being net positive, and we're seeing some nice growth. But the question is, how long will it take for them to become profitable? Could it happen this year? We'll have to wait and see. And then we'll also have to see more improvements from here. Right now, a lot of investors are concerned about the movie theater business. It's getting a lot of hate, a lot of bad stuff from the media. That's why AMC has been sinking the way it is. There's also the factor of manipulation and things like that. A lot of shorting on the stock as well. So that's why the share price is still down. The earnings were pretty good. The guidance was not extremely strong. We didn't get as much information on that. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But for now, because of the manipulation and other factors like that, I wouldn't be surprised if it just remains a little bit down. Salesforce, its shares also slipped because it only called for a single digit full year revenue growth, and that's because of guidance. EPS was a beat at $2.29. Revenue was a beat at $9.29 billion, better than expected. But the issue is their overall projection for the full year of 2025. They're saying that things are growing quite a bit, but not as much as what many analysts were expecting. So we're actually looking at weaker expectations. We're looking at an 8.6% growth. We were expecting something much bigger than that. So because the full year guidance is not the strongest and is taking into consideration the foreign exchange pressure, this is actually not looking as strong. And this is why the share price ended up slipping, because it wasn't as strong as what we projected. For Marathon, which is another one that retail watch, revenue increased by 229%, some pretty good numbers, and we actually saw some good growth as well. When it comes to their guidance, it was kind of like in the middle, so nothing too crazy happened to this. It's kind of flat as well. So not much happened to Marathon. Now the question is what's going on with the share prices. So what do I think about PCE data? In my opinion, PCE will most likely be aligned with expectations for all items. So it should be somewhere close to 2.4, 2.5% most likely based off CPI. But I'm not too sure about core PCE. This could be a little bit hot. There is a risk of that. If it's anywhere around 3%, that would be a little bearish. So just be very, very careful. My best prediction would be it's going to likely align with expectations, but there is a risk of core being a little bit hot based on what we saw from the previous data. So I'm going to be very cautious with this. I want everyone to be very careful. What this means for SPY is this thing is barely holding five, so it actually popped in, then came back down. I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of gap down regardless of what the data looks like, and then we get like a little pop. But just to be safe, we'll have to wait and see. So, like I've said in my previous videos, I'm not really a fortune teller. I'm not some kind of magician or anything like that that knows exactly what's going to happen in the future. I don't know what's going to happen a lot of the time. I really don't know what the data will look like. I can't predict CPI or what Jerome Powell will say. So in this case, I don't know what PCE will cause, so I can't tell you anything with super high certainty. If we get really good numbers, if PCE is below the expectations I showed you, alongside core, especially if we get like 2.7% or below that. For core, we could see a nice balance in the pushback up to 507 and 508.5. If we get bad numbers or everything's aligned with expectations, it could go either way. So if we're bullish, 507 and 508.5 are coming. If we're bearish, we're going to be dropping to 503.5 and eventually 502. What do I think is going to happen? What is my prediction? Well, honestly, guys, I think that it's possible that we might get the data very close to expectations, and they'll use this as an excuse to kind of drop the market a little bit. I think the market might gap down, and then I think it might rebound intraday. So they might try to get everyone to think the market's going to crash and this and that. I think it's going to be part of their game. And then once everyone thinks the market will sink more, people get all excited, then they're going to drag it right back up and squeeze shorts. So I think that's the most likely possibility. We kind of like drop in the morning, then bounce later on during the day. And we've been following that trend for the last couple of days. So I think it might happen again. That's what I think is the most likely possibility. But don't hold me accountable. I'm just giving you guys what I think is probable. I can't promise anything because it really depends on the data and stuff. For the QQQ, this is on a slight downtrend when it comes to technicals. So there's a very good chance that from a technical standpoint, it does look like it could lose 434, but we'll have to wait and see if that happens. Now, if we're bullish, you want to see it break 436 and fill its gap above near 438. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 434 and sink to 432, followed by 430. In my opinion, it is starting to downtrend a bit for the past 3 days. So there's a risk of this dropping a little bit lower, but then we'll have to see if this bounces. Now, let me say something very important. I can't predict the future. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think we're going to gap down tomorrow. I think that's the most likely thing. It depends on the data, of course. I don't know for sure, but I think we're going to gap down. And I think that just like with SPY, when we gap down, they're going to use this as a trap to maybe either fill this gap or maybe just try to trick people into turning to mega bears. And then they're going to reverse the market when people least expect it towards the end of the day. And we're going to make a full recovery. I think that's the most likely possibility. I think that this could be fueling more manipulation. I think that's what's going to likely play out. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. Don't hold me accountable too much if something goes wrong because, like, the truth is, I can't really control you. And simultaneously, you guys know I just don't know what the data will give us. So, that's what I would probably end up saying. For Tesla, we have a nice cup and handle like formation. This actually played out very nicely, but we didn't get a break above like 205 quite yet. If we break 205, this will be very bullish and Tesla could push for, I'd say 212. If we fail to do so, if we're bearish, you want to see it lose 200 and 197.5 to 198. If you lose that, a bigger drop is coming to the mid 190s. How do I think Tesla's going to look? Well, honestly, guys, with this cup and handle like formation, it is possible that Tesla tries to break out in the future, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens with all this data and things like that. So for Tesla, let me just say that, in my opinion, there's a very, very good chance that Tesla might end up gapping down a little bit. It might start off a little bit weak, just like SPY. Then I'm going to be looking for a bounce. I think that depending on where we open, if we open around 198 or so, look and see if we get a bounce. If we gap down and try to fill our gap, there's a chance they might do this. Just try to trick as many people as possible, and that's what I think might end up happening to Tesla too. It might start down here, then try to bounce. But even if I'm wrong, guys, always look at your levels just to be safe. That's what I think is the most likely possibility. For Nvidia, Nvidia is looking kind of weak. It's been downtrending for the last couple of days, respecting this downtrend. Let me just zoom in so it's a little bit more clear right here. Give me 1 second, guys. So this is what Nvidia is looking like, right? It's continuing to fall, forming a bearish wedge. There's going to be a risk of this kind of gapping down as well, which might drag the QQQ down. But I don't think it's going to crash forever because that's going to be like the most expected move. It might gap down, trick a lot of people, then bounce right back up. We'll have to see if that ends up being the case. Watch resistance at 776 and then 782. Watch support all the way down towards 768. And if we lose that, I could see it coming down to 762. And if we lose 762, 750 could be our next target. I think that Nvidia might come down a little bit more, and I think it's going to get a bounce intraday. And if it breaks this yellow trend line, it could actually reverse when people least expect it. But that's what I think is the most likely possibility. We gap down and then bounce. That's what I think will happen. But just to be safe, we'll wait and see. For Apple, I think I think the same thing is happening to Apple. It's looking kind of weak right now. It's been on this downtrend. We're going to likely test 180 again. Might actually gap down to 180, maybe even lower than that. We could even gap below 180 if something not so good comes out. But if we do, push upwards when we open, watch resistance at 181.36, 182.5, and then 183.5 in case we do push higher. If you drop lower, watch 180, 179, then 178 as critical support. 178 is a big level because we bounced off there many times. I think Apple will gap down tomorrow, trade sideways close to 180, then try to rebound as the day goes on, just to try to trick as many investors as possible. I think that's what's going to pan out. That's just based off the most logical thing. It's also based off what we were seeing in the media and other things like that, which I don't really want to talk as much into detail about because it could be kind of risky for me. So I'm just going to be a little quiet and just let you know that I think, for apparent reasons, that the market may gap down tomorrow. Then we might get a bounce intraday. So we'll have to wait and see. With that being said, let's just go over a couple more. SPY is looking kind of weak, at least in terms of technicals, so there's a risk of us gapping down, but then we'll see if we bounce or not. Rivian is down a little bit in the after hours. We're going to be testing our 20 EMA if we try to break out. If we gap down, watch it come down to about 10.8, or even below this, around 10.5. And then it might try to bounce after that if it does hit this level. If we get a bounce, let's see if we can break 11.4 over the next couple of days. If we break the 20 EMA, a bigger move is coming to the upside. For SoFi, SoFi is looking like it's cooling off a little bit, but it's just approaching its key EMAs right here. So you can see we have 8.72 and 8.5 as supports. It might retrace a little bit down here, then try to bounce intraday. That's what I think is the most likely possibility. But we'll see. We'll see where it tries to base at. It is still dropping. ARM is dropping. Watch 129 as support. If we lose this, we could come down to about 125. But at one of these levels, it may try to bounce. So either bounces here or maybe a little bit lower. It does look kind of weak though, so there's a risk of it coming down lower. Super micro, I told you it might be sinking towards 800. We're at 804 right now. We could sink even lower. It's about 780 if that ends up being the case. But then watch and see if we bounce from either here or there. Do we bounce off 800 or 780? We'll just have to wait and see. For Palantir, this might come down as well. Make sure you watch support at 24 and then 23.6. At one of these levels, it's going to likely try to rebound if we do testings. Then we'll see how it does after that. For the IWM Russell 2000, we'll see what happens. We're approaching 201.75 and then 200.4. We'll see where we try to bounce. So it could bounce at one of these levels. Uh, we'll have to wait and see. I do believe that it's getting closer to this 200 psychological level. So we might see it drop a little bit more. I would love to see it gap down, but if it does gap down, that does not mean we're going to crash. We could just bounce after that. For Microsoft, we're showing some strength right now. We're holding up nicely. We're still holding up. We have this resistance at this 408 area. If we break this, we could push higher towards like 410. So watch and see how this ends up moving. We're going to likely gap down tomorrow around 406, maybe a little bit lower. 405 is a support alongside 403.8. At one of these levels, I think we're going to be basing, and then we're going to look for a bounce. But I do see some downside coming to this. For AMD, AMD is showing some weakness right now, but it has support right here at 174.9. If we lose this, our next target is going to be around 173.6, 172.5, then 170. It might drop to some lower levels. It's looking a little bit weak right now, and then we'll see where it tries to base. For the VIX, this thing is looking like it's trying to curl just a bit, but it's going to depend on where we end up opening. Do we open at 13.93? Do we open it above 14? That's going to determine which way the market goes. So just wait and see where this thing is going. It is showing some strength, which does suggest to me that the market might open a little bit weakly tomorrow in a very, very weak manner. And then we'll see what happens after that. The dollar is showing some strength as well. It's kind of sideways, but if it does try to bounce from here, this could be a little bearish. So we'll see what that causes. Coinbase did push, but now it's coming back down. It came back down to fill its gap. I think we also have a gap over here. So it might drop a little bit more. We might actually open up or see a test of 192.5, and we'll see if we bounce off of that. So, excuse me, I see 192.5 coming. I anticipate we're going to come down a little bit more to test that. And then we'll see if it bounces or not. But I do see a little bit more downside. For Google, looking kind of weak. We're just barely at 136. If we lose this, a bigger drop could be coming to even lower levels. Let me pull up the daily chart. I think this is going to be very important. So the daily is looking pretty weak right here, guys. We also had this like bearish looking distribution structure right here. I'm going to be eyeing basically 133. If we lose 136, watch 133. It might bounce on one of those levels. I think that it could drop a little bit more, though it looks kind of bearish. So watch for more downside and see what happens when it tests 133. For Amazon, it is once again starting to downtrend a little bit, exactly what we predicted yesterday. And also, we have this gap to fill around this 170 area. So we might see Amazon end up actually dropping a little bit more towards 170, if not 168. And then around there, we might be looking for buyers to defend it. So see if we bounce at those levels, but I do anticipate it to come down to at least 170. For Meta, we're looking kind of bearish. We're starting to turn a little bit, but watch support at the 20 EMA. If we lose 483, I could see it coming all the way down to about 478. If we hold this, we could be looking for a bounce, but I do anticipate it's going to come down a little bit, and then we'll see what happens after that. Anyways, guys, that is it for this video. I have to tell you all, I can't be extremely certain on a day like this. Who knows what's going to happen with the data, but I do have a feeling that it's going to be close to expectations. Once again, there is a risk that core PC may be a little bit hot, so watch for that tomorrow morning. I'll be reporting this in the morning. And my best prediction is a lot of stocks will gap down, most likely. Start off weak, get everyone to just like panic, scare them, and then it's going to bounce. We're going to see a big bounce intraday as the market's been doing. It's been doing this for the last couple of days. It's like a trend. And I have a feeling that they're trying to toy with a lot of people who believe the market's going to crash. And we're going to see something that's very unexpected. So that's what I think is going to likely happen. I could be completely wrong on a day like this, guys. Please, once again, I don't know what's going to happen with the data, so I don't know for sure. But I'm willing to tell you what I think is the most likely possibility. And that's what I basically did in this video. All right, so I'll see you guys tomorrow. We'll see what happens with the data. Let's remain calm, cool, and collected. And once again, see you guys very, very soon. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. The market's to the moon because the long term is very bright. And peace out.